Oh, hey there. Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer at Functional Aesthetics EC. We're helping average guys perform better in their lives inside and outside the gym. So, right now I'm demonstrating a wood chop exercise. You might be saying, why are you going to do a wood chopping exercise? Is that just some sort of gimmicky exercise to try to get people into the gym, do something a little bit different, or we're getting bored of doing all the typical lifting and exercise movements? Or is there actually some value and rhyme and reason to doing a wood chop exercise? Well, other than the fact that it makes you look totally manly and tough as heck, hitting with a sledgehammer has a lot of additional benefits. So one thing is, and one of the things I didn't think about initially when I'm doing this, is the benefits to the cardiovascular system. You can notice right off the bat, just from doing a couple chops there, I'm already breathing relatively heavily. And unlike doing things like running or biking, where you're basically kind of keep your arms in that same position, for any of you who have watched my channel for some period of time, you know that I'm a big fan of doing breathing exercises such as Qigong and Tai Chi. And the reason that I like that is that it helps you bring the arms up, and you're changing the positions of your arms and your limbs, which also changes the position of your thoracic region here in the rib cage, and changes that position, how the oxygen is coming into your lungs. So the same thing here, when you're doing this wood chopping exercise, when you're coming up over the top like this, you have to extend your rib cage, extend your abdominals, really taking a deep breath, and then as you're coming down, exhaling out. So for that reason there, I find it's very good for helping to increase oxygen to the brain, help to stimulate you, get you more energy so that you can go out there and conquer the day. The one thing that I also noticed, I guess in addition to, say for example, you go out for a really long distance run or something like that, and it often tends to kind of make you feel more tired when you're done with it. Whereas when you do some wood chopping, it kind of makes you feel more energized. And this is something that I noticed a lot with power movements in general, is that they help you to feel more energized. And a lot of this I think has to do with the fact that you're kind of increasing testosterone, increasing human growth hormone, and that accelerating the weight quickly just tends to excite your central nervous system and make you more energized versus kind of beat down after a long run. So if you're feeling kind of tired, especially mentally, because getting that oxygen to the brain, right, and you need a little bit more energy to get through whatever sort of things you got done at the end of the day, so you're get done doing some work or something like that, and you are just feeling, mentally drained, but you still got some bills to pay, or you got to do some studying for some continuing education, or you're taking some classes for night school or something like that, and you just don't feel stimulated. Doing things like chops, ball slams, and stuff like that can be a great way to stimulate your mind. All right, so another benefit of doing wood chops is obviously from it's a full body exercise. So you're gonna be training your calves, your hamstrings, your glutes, and particularly you're gonna be training your abs. I often say that, doing traditional crunches, planks, and things like that, they're fine, but they're not gonna really make you that athletic. And in fact, there's a much better way to train the core, and that is doing exercises that combine the lower body, transferring energy through the core, through the midline here, and the core is anything from the pelvis all the way up to the base of the neck, and incorporating all of that, because that's basically where all your energy gets transferred from. So when I used to do Taekwondo back in the day, I always say, if you watch the person's midline, watch where their belly button is, and you can tell which way they're going to go, because and kind of predict if they're going to kick, if they're going to punch, and which direction their body's going to move by watching that, because everything originates from your center of gravity right around that belly button, right through your core, and all the energy is transferred from there. So when the hips move like this, you can see that where the body's going to go. So again, when you're doing your abdominal exercises, yes, you can try doing them on the ground and stuff like that, and if you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to probably build some abdominals, but as far as transferring that over to everyday life, improving your ability to be more athletic in everyday life, it maybe not so much. So when you do exercises, doing exercises like landmine row to a transfer like that, doing medicine ball throws, Russian twists, corkscrew exercises, and again, like doing this sledgehammer chop like this, you have to transfer that energy from the lower body up through the core here into the upper body and then deliver it. So again, another great way to train the core and also relieve a little bit of boredom as well. So I mentioned the fact that slamming and chopping exercises tend to help you develop power. Well, what is power? Power is just force times the acceleration, right? So whereas if you're powerlifting and you're just concerned with how much weight you can move at one time, power is about how fast can you move that weight, right? So if you're throwing a baseball, you're throwing a football, you're throwing the discus, you're out there on the golf course, and it all things that require speed. Boxing is another thing when you're doing martial arts. One of the reasons that Bruce Lee was such a tough competitor was not only because of his technique and his mastery of the different techniques in martial arts, but because of his mind-blowing speed, which speed is power, right? It's the ability, how fast can you accelerate and move a given piece of given body weight. So one of the benefits of power exercises is it also helps to increase tendon and ligament strength in a dynamic fashion, right? And help you to prevent pulling muscles in everyday life. So when you're in the gym, all you're doing is bodybuilding type exercises, powerlifting exercises, where it's in a controlled plane of movement, you're moving at a regular pace and everything, and there's not any quick stops and starts, you're not going to be prepared necessarily when you go out there and you start playing soccer, or you're doing baseball, you're out there on the golf course, you play a pickup game of football, and you're not necessarily going to be prepared for those quick stops and starts that are going to put extra strain on your tendons and ligaments. All right, so this next point goes hand in hand with the previous one, which was athletic development, developing more power, speed, and power, right? So mobility. Now, you can get mobility from doing static exercises. You can get mobility from doing bodybuilding exercises where you're taking in one of the, I think the differences between, say for example, when you're doing CrossFit and actually a lot of nothing that I have against CrossFit per se, but a lot of times the way people do CrossFit, or even a lot of the ways that people do exercises in the gym, when they're doing exercises, they're focusing more on their ego and how much weight they can lift versus how they are lifting the weight. So when you do your exercise, you want to make sure that you're focusing on a full range of motion, right? And so if you're doing that, you can actually develop more flexibility even with lifting weights. So a classic example of this would be, say for example, a famous bodybuilder from the past, his name was Tom Platz. The guy had absolutely huge, enormous legs and stuff, but he had amazing flexibility just because of the way that he trained. He would always, so for example, he'd be doing like Romanian deadlifts, and he'd be coming all the way down to the floor on every single rep, completely stretching the muscle out before he contract it and bring it back up at the top. Another example is, say for example, Ronnie Coleman. Now, he couldn't do a complete full splits, but he was pretty dang close. He'd be maybe a couple inches off the floor in his front splits at 275 pounds. So you definitely can, if you do it right, gain more flexibility and mobility doing everyday weightlifting exercises. But one of the downfalls of it is that you're typically building that range of motion in a kind of one plane of motion, right? So when you're doing bench presses, you're working in this sagittal plane of motion. When you're doing deadlifts, you're working in this sagittal plane of motion. When you're doing squats, you're still in the sagittal plane of motion. And when you're doing overhead presses, rows, they're all in that same plane of motion. So what I like to do, one of the differences between my methodology is to also incorporate rotational exercises, not only for your core, like you're doing exercises like this, but also for the entire body. And one of the ways you can do that is with doing the sledgehammer stuff. So if you notice, when I'm swinging it up, I'm rotating from the core here through the hips, bringing it up over the top, and then you also have to stretch out through the lats here, because the lats, which basically attach to the bottom of the pelvis here, come up, attach into the base of your shoulder capsule, and then when you're coming down, up like that. So because of the added speed component and because of how you have to rotate the body, you're adding in mobility. And the difference between flexibility and mobility is that flexibility is the ability of the muscles to get into a position. Mobility is the ability to come in and out with strength, right? So instead of just statically stretching yourself, you're very flexible. So say for example, like a gymnast who can do a flip or something to land in the splits without tearing a groin muscle. Whereas if you don't have that mobility, you might have to go down, maybe you can get into the splits, but it has to go a lot slower. All right, so now that we covered some of the benefits of doing wood chops and slanting exercises and why you should be doing it, Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to incorporate it into an actual workout. So you know that I'm kind of a fan of what I call hybrid strength training, which is blending different styles of training together. So you have your muscular endurance training, which typically goes along with endurance athletes, just to help them increase their strength a little bit, but they're still going to be doing it in a more endurance fashion. So typically these are going to be exercises that are strength training sets that are a minute or above in duration. So maybe you're doing high reps, 15 to 30 repetitions in one set, and it's not going to build a lot of strength, but it is going to build more muscular endurance. Then what you have is more of a bodybuilding style. So it's a little bit heavier weight, more in that mid-range, maybe 60 to 80%, probably more like 70 to 80% of what your one rep max would be. So how many, like 70 to 80% of the maximum weight that you can lift for one rep, right? And then after that, you're gonna have a more powerlifting style, which is focused on strength, right? And so this is gonna be where you're moving weights usually in that 80% and above of your one rep max. And typically the rep ranges are anywhere between 1 to 5 reps for multiple sets there to help develop as much strength as possible. And then the final one is what I talked about in this video, which is power. So how fast are you moving that weight in a given period of time, right? And so I like to blend those all together so you're capitalizing all the benefits of them without, in helping to, I guess, prevent against some of the negative side of some of these exercises. So for example, if all you do is powerlifting, maybe you become a little bit slow and clumsy, although you're really super strong, right? Now, if all you're doing is bodybuilding stuff, sure, you have a lot of muscle, but maybe you're not quite as strong as you look, because like I've said in some other videos, strength is actually a skill. You might have the potential to be really strong, but if you're not actually training for it, your nervous system is not coordinated to be able to take all those muscle fibers and fire them, and the motor units attached to them, and fire them all in unison, okay? So that's why I like to blend that together. So how you might do that is, for example, if you're gonna doing the wood chops and the slams, because they are kind of a core exercise, you're doing a because they are kind of a flexion exercise, right? You're flexing your midline this way, right? As opposed to extending it. Then you want to pair it up with an extension exercise. So for example, go do a compound movement. I like to have all my exercise workouts based around a compound or multi-joint exercise. The reason being is these are going to use the most amount of muscles at one time, meaning that they're going to use the most amount of energy, and so you want to do them early on in the workout. So for example, you could be doing a deadlift, right? You get done with a set of deadlifts, you go pick up that hammer and start chopping, right? Or pick up that medicine ball or that sandbag, start slamming it on the ground. You're going to be doing the flexion, which is going to work the posterior chain, and then you're going to pair that up with the chopping, which is going to work the anterior part of the body, and that flexion movement. The other benefit of that is one of them is more of a strength movement, right? And the other one is more of a power movement. So you're transferring back and forth between different energy systems. Now, what you could do after you're doing the wood chops is either go up and start doing chin-ups, or you could do biceps curls, right? So going from strength, power, isolation. Going from the hardest, a little less hard, and then the least difficult at the end when you're most tired. Okay, so I can hear some of you guys saying, well, I don't have a tire and I don't have a sledgehammer, so what can I do? Well, first off, they're not really that hard to get. You could probably go and get a sledgehammer for 20 bucks or less at your local hardware store, and you can get a tire for free. Just go by your local automotive store. They usually have tires thrown out back. Grab one of those, a great versatile piece of equipment. You can see I put an eye bolt in the front of this. You can do pulling and dragging exercises with it. Also good core exercises, which I might show in a different video. Now, if you are really in a pinch and you're out traveling on the road or something like that, you don't have one of these things. So for example, you can build your own sandbag. Probably last year, I think it was. You could look it up, look through the stuff on my channel. Maybe I'll leave the link in the description here for this video. I showed how to create your own sandbag so that it doesn't fall apart, you don't have sand coming out everywhere and everything. So if you want to check out that video, check it out in the description below. Otherwise, if you don't have the sandbag, you're out, on vacation or something, you can go pick up a rock in the woods, pick up the thing, slam it down on the ground. Same concept, super simple, doesn't have to be fancy, it's not going to be exactly the same stimulus as you would get from a sledgehammer, but very similar type of exercise. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you gained some insight into the benefits of this exercise. Other than that, it looks really cool to do it, at least in my personal opinion. And if you'd like to see more content like this related to diet for training, workout design, and not only how to prevent injuries, but also how to help rehab around some injuries, I also have content related to that on this channel. So if you'd like to see anything like that, go ahead, consider subscribing by hitting the button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen here, and hit that like button as well. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you all next time for more health and fitness related information.